Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. Evelyn Sanders moved silently through the polished marble hallways of Hawthorne and Beck, her cleaning cart gliding on squeaky wheels. The faint scent of lemon cleaner lingered in her wake. Her dark green uniform, creased but clean, blended seamlessly with her surroundings, making her as much a part of the furniture as the leather chairs or the abstract art adorning the walls. No one ever really saw Evelyn. She had spent nearly 20 years working for the corporation, cleaning up the remnants of late-night meetings, wiping away coffee spills from frantic brainstorming sessions, and ensuring that every office sparkled before the first executive arrived. To the company's elite, Evelyn was a shadow, a necessary function, not a person. But Evelyn saw everything. She knew that Mr. Blake from marketing always left his desk cluttered with candy wrappers and crumpled ideas he never dared to present. She noticed that Ms. Harper, the ambitious VP, often worked late but cried quietly at her desk, muffling her sobs with the cuff of her blazer. She even knew about Mr. Calloway, the CEO, who often received suspiciously private envelopes labeled with "confidential" and tucked them hurriedly into his briefcase. Evelyn's world was one of observation, not participation. She had long accepted this reality, understanding her place in the hierarchy of Hawthorne and Beck. Yet, there was a quiet strength in her that no one had ever bothered to notice. Every morning, as she rode the bus to work before dawn, Evelyn flipped through her notebook, a battered, leather-bound journal filled with sketches and calculations. Most people would be surprised to learn that the invisible cleaning lady held a degree in engineering. A degree she had abandoned pursuing professionally when life demanded sacrifices she hadn't anticipated. Life had been unkind, stripping her of opportunities and replacing them with responsibilities. First, it was her husband's unexpected death, leaving her as the sole provider for their 2 young children. Then, her mother's declining health required around-the-clock care. Evelyn had done what needed to be done, taking on whatever work she could find. Cleaning wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. The only indulgence she allowed herself was the notebook. It was filled with ideas for the company she secretly dreamed of starting one day. Evelyn had spent years imagining ways to create a better, more inclusive workplace. Her designs detailed ergonomic office equipment, collaborative tools, and even new ways to make meetings more effective. It was a world of innovation tucked away in a cleaning cart. But dreaming was one thing, acting on those dreams was another. Evelyn's reality was rooted in practicalities, punching the clock, saving for her grandchildren's education, and making ends meet. This morning, however, felt different. As Evelyn pushed her cart into the executive boardroom, she overheard snippets of a heated conversation. The room was empty save for 2 voices emanating from the adjacent conference room. Evelyn knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, but curiosity got the better of her. "I'm telling you, Calloway, this is unsustainable," a woman's voice argued. Evelyn recognized it as Ms. Harper. "We're hemorrhaging talent. The younger generation doesn't want to work for a company that treats them like cogs in a machine. We've always done things this way, and we've been successful," Calloway retorted. His tone was dismissive. "Why fix what isn't broken?" Evelyn couldn't help but smirk. If only they knew, she thought, shaking her head. She finished polishing the table and emptied the trash can. The conversation in the next room grew more animated, but Evelyn tuned it out, focusing on her task. That's when she noticed it. A folder had been left on the table, its contents spilling out in a haphazard mess. She wouldn't have paid it any mind except for the title printed boldly across the top page, "Strategic Restructuring Plan." She hesitated. It wasn't her place to touch anything that wasn't trash or dirt. But the document caught her eye. Evelyn didn't open it, she wasn't a snoop, but the little she could see spoke volumes. It was a list of names, employees, salaries, and notes beside each. A wave of unease washed over her as she realized what it was, a list of planned layoffs. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she straightened the papers and returned them to the folder. She couldn't help but wonder if her name was on that list. The thought was chilling but unsurprising. People like her were always the first to go. As she left the room, Evelyn's mind raced. The company was making decisions that would affect hundreds, maybe thousands of lives, all while ignoring the very foundation of what made a workplace thrive, its people. It was the same short-sighted thinking she had outlined in her notebook, the same lack of vision that had driven her to start sketching her own ideas in the first place. That night, as Evelyn sat at her small kitchen table with her notebook open, she made a decision. For years, she had been content to watch from the sidelines, invisible and overlooked. But the folder had sparked something in her, a need to speak up, to challenge the status quo, to make her voice heard. It was time to stop being invisible. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, her notebook spread open under the warm glow of a single hanging light. The silence of the small apartment was broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the scratch of her pen against paper. Tonight, she wasn't simply jotting down ideas. She was strategizing, preparing for a moment she had never dared to imagine, but now seemed inevitable. Her mind replayed the glimpse of the strategic restructuring plan folder she'd seen earlier. It wasn't just a list, it was a ticking time bomb. People she had worked alongside, faces she passed in the hallway every day, were about to lose their livelihoods. Evelyn knew she couldn't just stand by and let it happen, but the question of how gnawed at her. What could a cleaning lady do against the corporate machine? The answer lay in her notebook. Over the years, she had filled its pages with observations, ideas, and blueprints, pieces of a puzzle that had yet to come together. She had analyzed inefficiencies in the company's operations, imagined solutions, and even created detailed diagrams for improving workflows. But it was all theoretical, a private outlet for her frustrations and creativity. She never thought it would be anything more. Tonight, it had to be more. Evelyn stayed up late into the night, revising her notes, polishing her arguments, and sketching out a presentation. If she was going to step into the spotlight, she needed to be prepared. By the time dawn broke, her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but her heart was alight with determination. The following day, Evelyn arrived at work earlier than usual. The building was still dark, and her footsteps echoed in the empty hallways. She wheeled her cart into the janitor's closet and carefully placed her notebook inside her bag. Today wasn't going to be a typical day. As the morning unfolded, Evelyn went about her tasks with her usual efficiency. She emptied trash cans, wiped down desks, and exchanged polite nods with those who acknowledged her presence. But beneath her calm exterior, her mind was racing. She was waiting for the right moment. That moment came just after noon. The executive team had gathered in the boardroom for a high-stakes meeting. Evelyn had overheard enough conversations to know they would be discussing the restructuring plan. Her heart pounded as she pushed her cart toward the room, her bag slung over her shoulder. The large double doors of the boardroom were slightly ajar, and she could hear the murmur of voices inside. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the door handle. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room fell silent. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward her, a mix of confusion and irritation. Evelyn had never been inside the boardroom during a meeting before. Her presence was as unexpected as it was unwelcome. "Evelyn," Mr. Calloway said, his tone sharp. "We're in the middle of something. Can this wait?" She didn't flinch. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Calloway, but I believe I have something important to share with you and the rest of the team." The room erupted in murmurs. Ms. Harper raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, while others exchanged incredulous glances. "What could you possibly have to share with us?" one of the executives sneered. "We're discussing matters far beyond your pay grade." Evelyn ignored the jab. She stepped forward, her hands gripping her bag tightly. "I understand this is unconventional, but I've worked at this company for nearly 20 years. In that time, I've seen and heard more than you might think. I've also spent those years observing ways to improve how we operate. I have ideas, solutions, that could make a real difference." Calloway leaned back in his chair, a skeptical smirk on his face. And you think now is the time to share these ideas? Yes, Evelyn said firmly. Because I saw the restructuring plan. I know what you're planning to do, and I believe there's a better way. The room went silent again, but this time it was a charged silence. Calloway's expression darkened. That's confidential information, he said coldly. You have no business. Maybe not, Evelyn interrupted, her voice steady. But I'm here anyway. And if you're truly committed to the success of this company, you'll hear me out. Ms. Harper leaned forward, a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. Let her speak, she said, cutting off Calloway's retort. If she's bold enough to come in here, we might as well listen. Evelyn placed her bag on the table and pulled out her notebook. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it to the first page, but her voice was steady as she began to speak. For years, I've been documenting inefficiencies in this company, she said. I've watched talented employees burn out because of outdated processes. I've seen opportunities for improvement that were ignored because no one was looking for them. And I've spent countless nights developing solutions. She flipped through the pages, showing them detailed sketches and calculations. These are designs for ergonomic workstations that could reduce physical strain and improve productivity. This is a proposal for a mentorship program to support new hires and retain talent. And this, she said, pointing to a flowchart, is a plan for restructuring that doesn't involve layoffs, but instead reallocates resources to areas where they're most needed. The executives stared at her, their expressions a mix of surprise and disbelief. Evelyn continued, her confidence growing with every word. You talk about cutting costs, but you're ignoring the human cost. Morale is low, turnover is high, and your current plan will only make things worse. If you invest in your people instead of treating them as expendable, you'll see returns that go beyond the bottom line. Ms. Harper was the first to respond. These are impressive, she said, flipping through the notebook. Did you develop all of this on your own? Yes, Evelyn said simply. Calloway, however, was less impressed. This is all theoretical, he said dismissively. You have no experience running a company, no understanding of the challenges we face at this level. You're right, Evelyn admitted. I don't have your experience. But I have something you don't, perspective. I see things you overlook, because you're too far removed from the reality of this company. And I'm not asking you to implement my ideas blindly. I'm asking you to consider them, to see that there's a better way. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension in the room was palpable. Then Ms. Harper stood up, holding the notebook. I think we should give this a chance, she said. We've been stuck in our ways for too long, and it's time for a fresh perspective. Several other executives nodded in agreement, their skepticism giving way to curiosity. Calloway looked around the room, clearly outnumbered. With a reluctant sigh, he said, Fine. We'll review her proposals. But don't think this changes anything. Evelyn smiled, a mix of relief and triumph washing over her. Thank you, she said. That's all I'm asking. As she left the boardroom, her heart was pounding, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear. She had stepped out of the shadows and made her voice heard. And though the battle was far from over, she knew she had taken the first step towards something greater. Evelyn wasn't invisible anymore. Over the next several weeks, Evelyn's life transformed in ways she could never have anticipated. What had started as a spontaneous act of courage had spiraled into a whirlwind of meetings, discussions, and unexpected alliances. The notebook that had been her private sanctuary of ideas was now the centerpiece of Hawthorne and Beck's internal debates. The morning after her presentation to the executives, Evelyn was called into a meeting with Ms. Harper. It was the first time Evelyn had ever been in an office for a reason other than cleaning it. The space felt both foreign and intimidating, with its sleek furniture and walls adorned with framed accolades. Ms. Harper greeted her with a genuine smile and gestured for her to sit. Evelyn, I'll be honest, Ms. Harper began. I wasn't sure what to expect yesterday, but your presentation left me intrigued. I reviewed your notebook in detail last night. There's a lot of potential here, but we need to refine it, flesh out the ideas into actionable strategies. Evelyn nodded, still feeling a twinge of disbelief that this was happening. I understand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove these ideas can work. Ms. Harper leaned forward, her expression earnest. You've done something remarkable, Evelyn. You've captured the attention of people who rarely look beyond their own bubble. But this is just the beginning. If we're going to make real change, you'll need to step into a role that's very different from what you're used to. Evelyn's stomach tightened. What do you mean? I want you to work with our operations team, Ms. Harper said. You'd act as a consultant, helping us translate your ideas into real-world solutions. It would mean stepping out of your comfort zone, but I believe you're up to the challenge. Evelyn sat in stunned silence. The idea of working with the operations team, of being part of the decision-making process, was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. For years, she had been on the periphery, invisible to those around her. Now, she was being invited into the very heart of the company. I don't know what to say, Evelyn finally managed. Say yes, Ms. Harper replied, smiling. We'll provide you with the resources you need to succeed. And if you're worried about your current responsibilities, don't be. I've already arranged for someone to cover your shifts. Evelyn hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This was an opportunity she had never imagined, but it also came with risks. Could she navigate the corporate world, a place so different from the one she knew? Could she prove herself in a room full of people who likely still viewed her as just the cleaning lady? But then she thought of her family, her children, her grandchildren, and the legacy she wanted to leave for them. She thought of all the people who would be affected by the restructuring plan, people whose lives might change for the better if her ideas were implemented. With a deep breath, she looked Ms. Harper in the eye and said, Yes. I'll do it. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Evelyn was introduced to the operations team, a group of professionals who ranged from mildly curious to openly skeptical about her new role. She spent hours in meetings, explaining her ideas and answering questions, all while grappling with the unfamiliar language of corporate jargon and spreadsheets. At first, the team treated her with thinly veiled condescension. They questioned her qualifications, challenged her suggestions, and often dismissed her input outright. But Evelyn held her ground. She came prepared, backing her ideas with data and logic, and slowly began to earn their respect. One of the turning points came during a meeting about the proposed mentorship program. The team had been debating the feasibility of pairing senior employees with new hires, citing concerns about time constraints and logistical challenges. Evelyn listened quietly as the conversation spiraled into a stalemate, then spoke up. I understand your concerns, she said, her voice calm but firm. But have you considered the cost of not implementing this program? High turnover rates, low morale, decreased productivity, these are all symptoms of a workforce that feels undervalued and unsupported. A mentorship program isn't just an investment in new hires, it's an investment in the entire company. Her words struck a chord. The room fell silent as the team members exchanged thoughtful glances. After a moment, one of the senior managers nodded. She's right, he said. We've been looking at this the wrong way. Let's revisit the numbers and see how we can make it work. From that moment on, Evelyn's presence in the room began to carry weight. She wasn't just the cleaning lady with a notebook anymore, she was a voice of reason, a source of innovative solutions. The team started to seek her input, valuing her perspective in ways they never had before. But not everyone was supportive. Mr. Calloway, the CEO, remained a vocal critic. He frequently undermined Evelyn's contributions, questioning her expertise and dismissing her ideas as impractical. It was clear he viewed her as a threat to his authority, and he wasn't afraid to make it known. During one particularly tense meeting, Calloway openly challenged her proposal for restructuring the company without layoffs. This plan of yours, he said, waving her document dismissively, is idealistic at best. You're talking about reallocating resources and retraining employees like it's a simple fix. Do you have any idea how much that would cost? Evelyn met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. "I do," she said. "And I also know how much it costs to lose skilled employees, to damage morale, and to rebuild a workforce from scratch. The numbers are in the proposal. If you'd like, I can walk you through them again." The room was silent as the two locked eyes, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Ms. Harper intervened. "Let's not lose sight of the bigger picture," she said diplomatically. "Evelyn's plan is ambitious, but it's grounded in logic and data. I think it's worth pursuing." Calloway muttered something under his breath, but didn't argue further. Evelyn took a deep breath, grateful for Ms. Harper's support. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was determined to see her vision through. Outside of work, Evelyn's life remained grounded in the familiar. She still rode the same bus, shopped at the same grocery store, and spent her evenings with her grandchildren. But there was a newfound lightness in her step, a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table revising her proposals, her grandson approached her. "Grandma," he said, his eyes wide with curiosity, "are you going to change the world?" Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I don't know about the whole world," she said. "But I'm going to do my best to make a difference." And she meant it. For the first time in her life, Evelyn felt seen, not just by others, but by herself. She was no longer content to be invisible, to watch from the sidelines as life passed her by. She had stepped into the light, and there was no going back. The journey was far from over, but Evelyn was ready for whatever came next. She had found her voice, and she intended to use it to create a future worth fighting for. Evelyn's new role at Hawthorne and Beck became a defining chapter in her life, but it was also fraught with challenges. While she had gained some allies within the operations team and earned cautious respect from a few executives, the uphill battle against entrenched attitudes and resistance to change loomed larger with every passing day. The environment was anything but welcoming, and Evelyn knew that proving her worth would require more than just good ideas. It would demand resilience, strategy, and unwavering determination. Her days were grueling. Evelyn began her mornings earlier than ever, poring over reports, learning the nuances of corporate operations, and refining her proposals. Her evenings were spent at the same kitchen table where she had first dared to dream of something more, but now the stakes were higher. She was no longer just brainstorming ideas, she was crafting solutions meant to withstand scrutiny and implementation. The weight of responsibility often felt suffocating, but Evelyn reminded herself why she was doing this: for the employees who had no voice, for her family, and for herself. The tension between Evelyn and Mr. Calloway, the CEO, continued to grow. Calloway saw her as a disruptor, someone threatening the traditional structure that had benefited him and others at the top for years. His disdain for her was barely concealed, manifesting in dismissive remarks during meetings and strategic delays in approving her initiatives. Despite the hostility, Evelyn refused to be intimidated. She understood that change was rarely welcomed, especially by those who stood to lose power or control. One of the critical moments in Evelyn's journey came during a company-wide town hall. It was an annual event where employees gathered, either in person or via video conference, to hear about the company's direction and achievements. Evelyn had been invited to present her ideas, a decision pushed through by Ms. Harper, despite Calloway's objections. It was a golden opportunity, but it was also a high-stakes gamble. On the day of the town hall, Evelyn stood backstage, clutching her notes. Her heart pounded as she listened to Calloway address the crowd with his usual corporate platitudes. The room was filled with hundreds of employees, from entry-level workers to senior executives, and thousands more tuned in remotely. It was a far cry from the quiet boardroom where she had first voiced her ideas. The enormity of the moment threatened to overwhelm her, but Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about the janitor's closet she had called her office for so many years, the quiet mornings spent cleaning desks and emptying trash cans, and the countless moments when she had felt invisible. That person was still a part of her, but she wasn't just a cleaner anymore. She was someone with a voice, someone who deserved to be heard. When Calloway introduced her, his tone was tinged with skepticism. Our next speaker, he said, is someone who's been with us for years, working quietly behind the scenes. She has some unconventional ideas she'd like to share. Please welcome Evelyn Sanders. The applause was polite but lukewarm, a reflection of the audience's uncertainty about what to expect. Evelyn stepped onto the stage, the bright lights temporarily blinding her. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, and for a brief moment, she froze. But then she spotted Ms. Harper in the front row, her expression filled with encouragement, and Evelyn found her courage. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady, despite the nerves coursing through her. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Evelyn Sanders. I've been a part of Hawthorne and Beck for nearly 20 years. Most of that time, I worked quietly in the background, making sure this building, and the people in it, had a clean and comfortable space to work in." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But over those years, I've also been observing, learning, and imagining how we could make this company better, not just for the executives, but for everyone. Because a company isn't just its profits or its products. It's the people who show up every day, who pour their time, energy, and passion into making it succeed." The audience began to stir, their initial indifference giving way to curiosity. Evelyn continued, her voice growing stronger with every word. She spoke about the mentorship program, the ergonomic designs, and the restructuring plan that prioritized reallocation over layoffs. She shared personal anecdotes about the employees she had gotten to know over the years, stories that highlighted their dedication, struggles, and untapped potential. "I know some of you might be wondering," she said, addressing the elephant in the room, "what qualifies me to stand here and speak to you today? The truth is, I'm not an executive. I don't have an MBA, and I've never held a leadership position. But what I do have is perspective. I've seen this company from the ground up, and I've experienced what it feels like to be overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated. And I believe that if we can change that, if we can create a culture where every employee feels seen and supported, we can achieve things that go far beyond what's on a balance sheet." The room erupted in applause, a wave of energy that caught Evelyn off guard. She blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the response. When she glanced toward Calloway, his expression was unreadable, but Ms. Harper was on her feet, clapping enthusiastically. After the town hall, Evelyn was inundated with messages from employees across the company. Some expressed gratitude for her courage, others shared their own struggles and hopes for change. It was clear that her message had resonated, igniting a sense of possibility that had long been dormant. But not everyone was on board. Calloway's opposition intensified in the days that followed. He questioned her authority publicly, undermined her proposals in meetings, and even attempted to shift the narrative, painting her as an idealist with no grasp of reality. It was a calculated effort to discredit her, but Evelyn refused to back down. One evening, Ms. Harper called Evelyn into her office. "He's not going to let this go," she said, her tone serious. "Calloway sees you as a threat, and he's going to keep pushing back. You need to be ready for a fight." "I've been fighting my whole life," Evelyn replied. "This is just another battle." Harper smiled, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. "Then let's make sure you win." Together, they developed a strategy to counter Calloway's resistance. Harper used her influence to rally support from other executives, while Evelyn focused on refining her proposals and gathering data to back them up. They worked late into the night, driven by a shared belief in the importance of what they were trying to accomplish. The tipping point came during a board meeting where the restructuring plan was the primary topic of discussion. Calloway, as expected, launched into a tirade against Evelyn's ideas, dismissing them as impractical and risky. But this time Evelyn was ready. She presented a comprehensive analysis that not only addressed every one of Calloway's concerns, but also highlighted the long-term benefits of her approach. She had graphs, case studies, and testimonials from employees who supported the plan. By the time she finished, the room was silent. One of the board members, a seasoned executive who rarely spoke, broke the silence. "I've been with this company for over 30 years, he said. And I can't remember the last time someone presented a vision this compelling. I think it's time we listen. The vote was taken, and to Calloway's dismay, Evelyn's plan was approved. It was a victory hard-earned and deeply satisfying, but Evelyn knew it was just the beginning. Implementing the changes would require as much effort and resilience as convincing the board had. As she left the meeting, Evelyn allowed herself a moment to reflect. She had fought for her ideas, for the employees who deserved better, and for the belief that even the most unlikely voices could spark change. She wasn't invisible anymore, and she never would be again. The weeks following the approval of Evelyn's restructuring plan were some of the most challenging and transformative of her life. The decision to implement her ideas had been a victory, but it marked the beginning of an even tougher phase, execution. Convincing the board had been one thing, now she had to turn her vision into a reality. It was a task that required not only meticulous planning but also unwavering determination to navigate the resistance that still lingered within the company. Evelyn started by assembling a diverse team to help her implement the plan. She insisted on including employees from all levels of the organization: janitors, administrative staff, junior employees, and seasoned executives. "If we're going to build a better company," she told Ms. Harper, "we need every perspective at the table." The team meetings were lively and often chaotic, with debates that stretched late into the evening. People brought their frustrations, hopes, and skepticism, and Evelyn encouraged it all. She believed that the best solutions came from honest dialogue, even when it was uncomfortable. One of the first initiatives the team tackled was the mentorship program. Evelyn worked closely with HR to design a system that paired new hires with experienced employees who volunteered to guide and support them. To address concerns about time constraints, she proposed incorporating mentorship activities into existing work schedules, turning them into opportunities for collaborative learning rather than additional burdens. The program launched with a pilot group of 50 employees, and the results were immediate and profound. New hires reported feeling more confident and connected, while mentors said the experience reignited their passion for their work. Evelyn received handwritten notes from participants, thanking her for creating a program that made them feel valued. These small victories kept her going, even when the road ahead seemed daunting. The Ergonomic Workstation Initiative was another significant milestone. Evelyn partnered with designers and engineers to create affordable, adaptable furniture that could be customized to individual needs. She spent hours in the company's prototype lab, testing chairs, desks, and keyboard trays, often working alongside employees who volunteered to provide feedback. When the first batch of ergonomic workstations was rolled out, the positive response was overwhelming. Productivity increased, absenteeism due to physical discomfort dropped, and employees began to feel that the company cared about their well-being. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Calloway continued to undermine Evelyn at every opportunity. He criticized the cost of the initiatives, dismissed employee testimonials as anecdotal, and tried to frame the restructuring efforts as a gamble that endangered the company's financial stability. His opposition was a constant source of tension, but Evelyn refused to be drawn into public conflicts with him. Instead, she focused on letting the results speak for themselves. Ms. Harper, meanwhile, emerged as one of Evelyn's strongest allies. She used her influence to counter Calloway's rhetoric and to rally support from other executives. Together, they built a coalition of leaders who believed in Evelyn's vision and were willing to stand up for it. Their partnership became a symbol of what the company could achieve when people from different backgrounds and roles worked together. The turning point came 6 months after the restructuring plan was implemented. The company's quarterly results showed a significant improvement in both financial performance and employee satisfaction. Revenue had increased, driven by higher productivity and lower turnover. Employee surveys revealed a dramatic rise in morale, with workers reporting that they felt more engaged, supported, and optimistic about the future. At the quarterly board meeting, Evelyn presented these results with quiet confidence. "These numbers," she said, pointing to the charts on the screen, "aren't just metrics. They represent people who feel valued, who are committed to this company because they believe it's committed to them. That's the real return on investment." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time, Evelyn saw a flicker of approval in Calloway's eyes. He didn't say much, but his silence spoke volumes. It was clear that even he couldn't argue with the success of her initiatives. As the months turned into a year, Evelyn's role at Hawthorne and Beck continued to evolve. She was no longer seen as a mere consultant or a former cleaning lady. She was now regarded as a leader, someone who had transformed the company from the inside out. Her story became a source of inspiration, not just within the organization but beyond it. Industry publications wrote articles about her journey, highlighting her innovative approach to leadership and her ability to turn adversity into opportunity. Evelyn, however, remained grounded. She still rode the same bus to work, still shopped at the same grocery store, and still spent her evenings with her grandchildren. Fame and recognition were never her goals. What mattered to her was the impact she had made, the lives she had touched, and the legacy she had created. One day, as she was leaving the office, a young woman approached her in the lobby. She was a new hire, barely out of college, and she looked nervous but determined. "Miss Sanders," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. Your story is the reason I applied here. I never thought I'd find a company that cared so much about its employees. You've shown me that it's possible." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you," she said. "But remember, it's not just about what the company does for you. It's about what you do for the people around you. Never underestimate the power of your own voice." The young woman nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. Evelyn watched her walk away, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, but now her voice echoed in the halls of Hawthorne and Beck and beyond. Evelyn's journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, battles to fight, and dreams to pursue. But she knew one thing for certain: she had found her purpose, and she would never let herself be silenced again. She had proven that even the most underestimated people could create extraordinary change, and she was determined to keep making a difference, one step at a time.